Zone Warfare keeps making changes that bring players back, and Spearhead was the biggest return the game has seen since launch. A spike in players though is not the same thing as keeping them, and that's the problem Zone now has to solve. Spearhead has made the game better, missions are better, contracts give you more reason to move, loot has more value than it did before, and Lamang has more places worth checking. But once that update surge settles, once players have seen all the new tasks, the points of interest then stop feeling new. The question becomes harder to avoid. Has Zone actually gained more depth? Or has Spearhead just made the game stronger for a while? So today I want to look at what Zone Warfare is now, what Spearhead delivered, and what's next that's needed to keep the players interested. The game is so much better after Spearhead. This is a game that finally has reasons to explore Lamang. And this is Zone Warfare.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
This is the awkward thing with Spearhead. It worked. That's the problem. Not because the update is bad, as it isn't. It's probably the best version of Zone we've had so far. But once the update actually brings the people back, once the players reinstall and the numbers start to jump, once the conversation starts again, the game gets judged differently. I've stopped asking, is this better than it was? And I've started asking, is this going to be enough to keep everyone playing? That is where Zone is now. Spearhead gave the game a better shape, the missions feel less like loose scattered jobs across a huge island, there's definitely more structure, more movement, more reasons for me to go to places instead of just passing them on the way to something else. I check buildings, I look for evidence, I'm clearing areas. I follow the tasks that make Lamang feel a bit more used than it did before, and that's definitely good. That's exactly the sort of thing Zone needed, because the part of the game that was never weak was the island. Lamang already has the scale. It's got the jungle, it's got the towns, checkpoints, compounds, airfields, everything. The issue never was, could this map look impressive? The issue for me was, does it give the game enough to do? Spearhead definitely gets closer. It's not all the way, not everywhere, but closer. And contracts help with that. They're not the massive answer to the end game. They're not something going to carry the game for years, but they give you something else to do when you leave the base. Go here, kill that, find something, bring something back. Get paid, get wrecked, go again. All simple stuff. But Zone needed that simple stuff. It needed more reasons to deploy that were not just tied to the next big mission in the chain. It needed the world to feel less like scenery between the objectives. And Spearhead has definitely moved in that direction. So I don't think this video needs to spend ages asking whether the update improved the game. It did. The better question is what the improvement now exposes. Because once missions are better, once loot matters more, once contracts give you something more to do, and once the island starts feeling more useful, the next problem becomes harder to ignore. What do I do when all the new tasks are done? Where does the loot feed into? What does my base become? How much pressure does survival actually create in this game? Can the AI carry the kind of tactical game Zone wants to be? And is there enough depth underneath Spearhead to keep the players here once this update buzz begins to fade? That's the real conversation now. Spearhead didn't finish Zone, it just raised the standard for it. And the next major update has to live up to that. The biggest change I felt with Spearhead wasn't just the missions. Looting in Zone would feel a bit pointless. You'd clear a house, open a few drawers, check a body, pick up a random thing, and half the time you'd be looking at it thinking, right, why am I actually carrying this? Is it worth anything? Do I need it? Does this do anything? And that's a problem because Zone loot can't just be decoration. It has to be something more than just stuff. It has to change your run a little bit, how long you stay, how carefully you search, what you're willing to risk. And I think Spearhead gets closer to that. Not all the way, but a little bit closer. There's more reasons to search properly. Contracts make certain items matter. High value loot makes you stop and look at what you're carrying. Some items are worth selling, some you want to hold, some make you open your bag and think, right, I just need to make more space for this. That's where the run, I think, is now starting to change. Loot now has values. You stop moving through buildings like they're just corridors between tasks. You check the rooms, you look at shelves, and you clear bodies properly. I'm always asking whether the next building is worth the risk of what I've already got. And I think that's where Zone is now starting to feel a little bit more connected to the game. The fight leads into the search leads into the bag, and the bag leads into a decision. Do I keep pushing, or do I go back and bank this? And that's the pressure Grey Zone needed more of, because Lamang is too big for loot to feel pointless. If I'm walking through that island, burning supplies, getting into fights and taking damage, then the stuff I have to find needs to matter. And Spearhead has made that better. You feel it when your bag starts filling up. You feel it when you find something worth taking, and then you feel it as the run changes from I'm just here to do a mission to I've actually got something I don't want to lose now. And that's definitely a real improvement. But this is also where the next major update has to go further, because loot having value is only the first step. Right now, too much of the chase still ends too quickly. I find something, I sell it or I hand it in, I gain some rep, I get paid, and that works. It's much better than it was before, but if Grey Zone wants the players to stay longer term, loot has to feed into more than money. It needs to feed into the prep, maybe repairs, maybe crafting, storage decisions, medical supplies, vendor services. It needs to be part of maybe base upgrades, better operations, just something else. Because the moment players have enough cash and the moment we know the routes is the moment the main work slows down. Loot needs another reason to matter, otherwise it just becomes noise again. And that is the line Grey Zone has to cross next. Spearhead made the loot worth picking up, the next major update has to make the loot worth keeping. The next thing Grey Zone needs is pressure, because Spearhead gives you more reasons to deploy now. That part is much better. You've got missions pushing you into places, contracts sitting on top of that, loot actually worth stopping for. So the run feels more active than it did before. The question now is what makes you hesitate? What makes you stop and think, can I actually keep going? Because that's where Grey Zone should be at its strongest. You're not loading into a tiny area and you're not spawning 5 minutes away from everything. You're being dropped into this huge, hostile island. You move through the jungle, across roads, past villages, pushing to those compounds. You end up miles from safety with whatever you bought in your bag. And that should matter more than it currently does, because right now, too much of that pressure still comes from whether the AI sees you. The operation itself should be the pressure. How far did I come? How much ammo have I used? How many meds have I got left? How much food and water did I bring? How heavy is my bag? How damaged is my gear? How far from the nearest LZ or COP? Can I still fight properly? Can I afford to go into one more building? It's that kind of pressure Grey Zone has been built for, and why the survival in the game is going to matter. Food and water can't just be little meters that you top up because the game tells you to. They need to affect the operation. Not in some annoying way where I'm having to drink every 5 minutes to stop the game shouting at me. That's not depth, that's just busy work. But if I'm heading into Lamang, if I'm planning my route properly, I'm going to be stacking contracts and missions. I'm going to try and hit 2 or 3 places before I come home. So if that's the case, supplies really should matter. I should feel the difference between a quick job near an LZ or having to push halfway across the island. This is where Grey Zone has a real chance to do something really different from other games. The map already supports it, the jungle supports it, and the distance supports it. The game already has that feeling of, right, I'm out of here now. If this goes wrong, I've still got to get back. But the systems underneath it need to push harder. Injuries need to change the run. If I'm running low on meds, that should change my decisions. Food and water should affect how long I'm staying out in the open. Gear condition needs to matter more. Weight also needs to matter more. Prep has to matter more. Because when these things start connecting, the mission stops just being the objective. The mission becomes the whole operation. Getting in, moving through, doing work, taking damage, finding loot, making the call. Do I keep going or do I get out now? That is where the tension in this kind of game is going to come from. And Spearhead has created more reasons to ask that question, but it's not fully built the consequences around it yet. This is what the next major update needs to do. It needs the island to push back in many more ways than just bullets, because if Grey Zone wants to keep the players interested, then every deployment needs to feel like a decision. Not just, what task am I doing? But more like, how long am I willing to stay out? How much am I willing to risk? That is the version of Grey Zone I want to see. Not harder for the sake of being hard. Not slower for the sake of it, but deeper. A game where pressure comes from the whole operation and not just the firefight at the end of it. And this is where Grey Zone has another problem. Not when you're out in Lamang, when you come back, because Spearhead has made leaving the base more interesting. You've got more reasons to deploy. The run itself has more shape now. But once you get back, the base doesn't feel as important as it should. I don't mean visually. It looks fine. The COP looks good. The home base looks good. It does the job. You land, you walk around, you go to vendors, you sort your stash, you repair, sell, buy stuff, hand it back in, kit back up, and then you leave again. That works, but it still feels too much like a menu that you walk around in. And for a game like Grey Zone, it feels like a missed opportunity because this is not meant to be some random lobby. This is supposed to be the center of the operation. This is where the work comes back to. This is where the island should start feeding into something. You should feel like the base matters because of what you did out there, not just because this is where the vendors stand. And right now, you come back from Lamang and most of the consequences get flattened into screens. Sell this, hand it in, repair that, buy some ammo, accept another task, go again. There's nothing wrong with those things. The game needs them, but if that's all the base is, then the operation loses weight when you return, because surviving should feel more like than just getting back to your stash. If I drive myself back after a long run, I've used my meds, my armor's damaged, I've pulled supplies. The base should do more with that, mechanically. The things I bring back should feel like they're feeding into the operation. Medical supplies maybe improve what I can prepare with. Damaged gear actually needs materials I bring back to fix it properly. Storage expands because I've invested into it. Maybe vendors unlock more services because I keep bringing them what they need. The base should start giving me better options because I keep supporting it, and that's where this could become important. Not as a home building game, not as some massive management sim, but as a progression layer, a reason to care about the return. Because Grey Zone already has the fiction for it. You're operating from a forward base on a hostile island. You're part of a faction. You have vendors that need things. You've got equipment constantly moving in and out. You've got intel coming back, supplies, weapons, evidence. You have people sending you to places because they want to control. So the base should not feel detached from the island. It should feel like a place where the island gets turned into progress. And that's the bit that Grey Zone still needs. The game has the deployment. You've got the helicopter ride. You've got the movement through the jungle. You've got fight, search, extraction. But we still need the return to have more meaning. Because that's where the long-term attachment to the game comes from. You don't just remember the fight, you remember the fight and what it helped you build. You remember what you unlocked because you survived. You remember what you can do now that you couldn't do before. And you remember the run because it changed something after the run ended. Grey Zone doesn't do enough of that, if anything, yet. Spearhead has to make the island feel more useful, but the next major update needs to make the base feel more necessary. Because if the whole game is built around going out and coming back, then coming back has to matter as much as going out. And then there's the mission side of it, because Spearhead has made the structure better. I do think that. You're doing more than you were before. You're going to places, you're investigating locations, you're checking buildings, you're looking for bodies, searching rooms. And that is a much better Grey Zone than just sending you across a massive island with barely enough reason to care about where you're going. But this is where the next step has to happen, because the better mission structure is not the same as a better mission. That's the difference. A mission can work, it can send you somewhere, it can give you an objective. And mechanically, that is fine. But when you finish it, what do you remember? Do you remember the story or the vendor? Do you remember why you were sent there? Do you remember what the body meant? Or do you just remember, I went here, picked this up, killed some AI, and handed it in? That's where Grey Zone still needs more, because the world is already built for it. That's the frustrating bit here. Lamang is not some empty shooting range. You've got dead bodies, crashed helicopters, medical sites, loads of stuff, newspaper clippings, military compounds, villages that look like something went wrong before you long arrived. You've got strange evidence everywhere. You've got vendors who clearly know more than they say. You've got factions with different reasons to be on the island. The place already feels like it should be full of stories, but all too often the game just shows you the aftermath without giving you enough reason to care about the cause. It shows you the evidence, but it doesn't build enough story around that evidence. If I find a body, I don't want the game to say, confirm the body. I want to understand why the body matters. Who was he? Why was he killed? Why is he here? What does my vendor know? What are they not telling me? If I find documents, it's the same thing. I don't want them just to be a task item. I want them to pull me further into the island. What do they reveal? What do they implicate? Because that is how missions become memorable, not just through the objective, but through the context. And Grey Zone has the right ingredients. Handshake should feel different to Gunny. Lab Rat, same with Artisan. Turncoat should feel different to Banshee. These vendors are not just people who hand out work. They are the people that should be pulling you into different versions of Lamang. One wants control, one wants answers, one wants leverage, and one wants supplies. Another wants secrets, and another wants something that's buried. And the more you work for them, the more the island should start to make sense. Or worse, the less it should make sense, because that can work too, as mystery is good. Not every answer needs to be dumped on the player. I don't want Grey Zone turning into this game where every mission ends with a massive lore paragraph explaining everything like I'm reading a wiki. That would be really shit. There needs to be more texture, more consequence, more connection between what I find and what I understand. The best missions in a game like this should make you feel like you've uncovered something, even if it's small, even if it's just another piece of the island. A village should stop feeling like a POI and start feeling like a place where something happened. And that is where Greyzone could get really strong, because the game already has atmosphere, and it has the jungle. We've said that it has military sites. It has the feeling of walking to places after the worst thing has happened already. Now the missions need to carry more of that weight. Spearhead made the missions better to play. The next major update needs to make them harder to forget, because if Greyzone wants players to stay interested, it can't just keep asking them to go somewhere. It needs to make them care about why they were sent there in the first place. So this is where Greyzone is now. Spearhead's done its job, it's brought people back, it's made the game feel better, it's given the missions more structure, contracts a reason to exist, it made the loot worth stopping for, it gave Lamang more purpose than it had before. The game needed that. It needed a reason for people to come back and say, alright, yeah, this is better now. But that's not the same as being done, and it's not the same as having enough depth to keep people here long term. And that's the next problem, because once players have seen the missions, they've tried the contract, they've been to the places and they've spent some money, what keeps them logging in? That is where the next major update has to answer. Not with more stuff is fine. More missions, they're fine also, same with POIs and loot. But the game needs a deeper connection with the systems. The operation needs more pressure, food, water, injury, supplies, distance from safety. All that needs to matter more. The base needs more purpose. Coming back should feel more like part of a game, not just the bit between deployments. The things you bring home need to feed into the preparation, upgrades, repairs, vendors, storage, crafting, whatever direction they choose. And the mission needs more memory, because Greyzone has the bodies, documents and crash sites. Now it needs more story around that evidence. That's the next step. Spearhead made Greyzone better to play. The next major update needs to make it harder to put down, because being better will always bring people back, but depth is what keeps them there. So I want to know, what do you think? Did Spearhead bring you back to play Zone Warfare? Are you still playing it now? And what does the next major update need to deliver for you? More survival, more progression, better loot? Drop it in the comments, because this is where the conversation actually matters. Greyzone has got people looking again. Now it needs to prove there's enough underneath it to keep them here. If you enjoyed the video, drop it a like, subscribe if you're new. Get involved in the comments, because it genuinely helps push stuff out to more people who care about these games. Cheers for watching, peeps. Love ya. Bye.